Okay, and let me just do a little spotlight here. Or if you could spotlight me, Sarah, that'd be great. Okay. All right. Well, good to see everybody. And thank you for making time to be here for, this is our third installment of Can We Talk? And in the past, the subtitle has been Building Relationships Through Disagreement. And this time we're entitling it Overcoming Polarization in a Time of Division. And I think both subtitles are very true. And when I look at what is happening in our country and in our families, in our communities, I think that it might be safe to say that for many of us, this has been that we haven't experienced such a time of division over political ideologies, maybe even ever in our lives to the extent that we experience it now. And it's really, you know, we feel it touches every part, even in our synagogue and in our Jewish community. We're one family. We are the people of Israel. And, you know, Jews have always had challenges, you know, getting along with each other as well. But things have taken on kind of a whole new level. And what's really interesting about this is that our tradition is so deeply rooted in the value of having different opinions and perspectives. You know, our whole Talmudic tradition, and we're going to get to look at that in a little bit in a moment, is really about celebrating knowledge and growth through being able to have different opinions and perspectives. And so the fact that that all of this is challenging us, what's going on in our country is very, you know, is very intense. So I am really pleased to be able to introduce Sasha Bonder of the One America movement. We've partnered with One America this year to create this series, and I had the privilege of being able to join a 2-day training for clergy, for Jewish clergy with One America back in December. And what I really appreciated about the perspective that One America brings is that they partner with organizations that are really doing some deep research into neuroscience and social psychology to really understand this dynamic that we're going through as human beings, as a people in this country and across the world. And I found for myself that kind of understanding the dynamics that we're going through this scientific lens has brought a lot more insight and understanding into how to navigate this in my own relationships and with facilitating other relationships in our synagogue and congregation. So at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce Sasha Bonder of One America movement.
Hi, friends. Nice to see everybody. You can give me a wave, use the other hand so we don't get all muscular in one arm. That's my public service announcement. 2 years into the pandemic, everybody, please use your non-dominant hand for your thumbs, because otherwise we're going to come out of this. Your one thumb is going to be all jacked and muscular, and your other thumb is going to be like, I didn't get any exercise from Zoom for 2 years. It's nice to see everybody. Thank you very much, Rabbi Avot. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I'm coming to you right now from just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and it's later for me, which is really exciting. It's 7 o'clock your time and it's 10 o'clock my time, and I'm really happy to be with you. So we're gonna just quickly get to know each other. I think you already know each other really well. I wanted to just throw out a question and put your answer in the chat. Actually, 2 things. Before we do that, everybody, if you can, come off of mute real quick, and it's going to be a cacophony of noise for a second, and everybody just say hi to somebody else that's here. All right, everybody unmute yourself, and we're going to go on the count of 3. We're going to go, don't do it yet. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and then you say, hello, hello, right? You say, and you wish somebody well, okay? So here we go. Everybody ready? Come off of mute. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Hey, Rabbi.
Hello,
Good day.
Norma.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, hi,
You're doing well,
Rabbi.
Wendy.
Rabbi.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi, Alan.
Hey, everybody.
Great, you did perfect. Thank you. Awesome. Back on mute, please, if you can. And the next thing that I want to ask everyone to just get to know each other a little relationally is, if you can, please put in the chat one place that you've been to in the world, in your state, in your city, in your home, one place that you've been to that you would love to go back to. Go ahead and put that in the chat now. One place that you've been to that you would love to go back to. Thanks. Israel, Poway, Norway, Israel, Jerusalem, Paris, Israel, Tulum Meadows. Wonderful. That's great. I'm gonna, in a minute, kick it back over to Rabbi Italy, Camarillo, big island of Hawaii, Boston. Well, yeah, come on. We'll get a lobster roll. No, not a lobster. Well, if you eat lobster, I don't. My wife's a rabbi, but they have a lot of lobsters. And I have to tell you, I've lived in Texas, Pennsylvania, California, New York. I've lived all over. And the Massachusetts accent, it's a terrific accent. So come on to Boston. Great. Before I kick it back over to Rabbi Kavod, I wanted to just share with you a little bit of who I am and how I got involved with One America Movement. We're going to go back to Rabbi Kavod, and then I'll share a little bit about what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is the science of polarization. So just real quick, I got involved as a lay leader when I served as the Jewish Federation of Greater Houston's inaugural Director of Social Action. And this was following Hurricane Harvey in 2017. And together with Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist neighbors, we helped rebuild homes in Houston and in Puerto Rico. And my background was in community organizing. I have a master's degree in social work with a clinical focus of children and families, and I also have a Master of Law in Social Policy. So when people ask me how we affect change, is that through policy and top down, or is that grassroots and bottom up? I like to say yes. I personally believe in this work because we need both the head and the heart in order to improve relationships. And I love that our organization, the One America Movement, incorporates both the head and the heart in terms of the science as well as the faith. So we'll learn a little bit more about the science of polarization tonight, and I'll share with you a little bit more about our overall journey over these 3 sessions. But for right now, I'm going to kick it back over to Rabbi Kavod, if that's okay.
You're muted.
Those of you who have done some of these sessions with me and us in the past may recognize some of these texts or been familiar with it, but I just want to share some of the strongest, most foundational texts for this work that we do. And really, when I say that kind of at the core of Jewish tradition and thought is one that celebrates argument, that celebrates dialogue, that celebrates different perspectives. They're really rooted in this text, and we'll have an opportunity to look at them and have some discussion, both as a large group and in small groups. The first one is from Pirkei Avot. This is 2nd century Mishnah. And it says, a controversy for heaven's sake will have lasting value, but a controversy not for heaven's sake will not endure. What is an example of controversy for heaven's sake? The debates of Hillel and Shammai. What is an example of a controversy not for heaven's sake? The rebellion of Korach and his associates. So just from this text right here, we don't really know about the nature of the arguments between Hillel and Shammai or Korach and his associates, but we know that the rabbis had a thought that there was argument that was that could be very positive, that could have lasting value. And there was arguments that would not, and in fact, in other places could even be so destructive. So there was a place to say that it's not about argument, or in Hebrew, machloket per se, that is the issue, but it's about how we argue. What's the motivation for the discussion? And this is where we have 18th, 19th century Rabbi Naftali Hertz that comments on this, as he says, since their disagreements, meaning Hillel and Shammai, were for attaining the truth. Therefore, when the truth became known, they would not continue to insist on their opinion, and they would accept in joy that the correct opinion had been clarified, because from the onset, they did not intend to disagree other than for the sake of heaven. So Rabbi Hertz is really sharing that there's something about the motivation that when Hillel and Shammai, or arguments for the sake of heaven, are entered into with a real desire to understand truth, then that is something that when it gets clarified, when you understand, you don't have to keep insisting. You get to rejoice. Wow, I grew in some way. I got some knowledge in some way. My agenda is not about proving myself right and you wrong, but trying to gain a greater understanding. On the other hand, in different places, the example of Korach and his associates were arguments that were more focused on being right, on some kind of an ego gratification or a power gratification or a control one, and it wasn't for the sake of heaven. So I want to just ask for a moment before we move on to get to explore some of these questions as a large group, which is, what role does motivation play in determining if an argument is for the sake of heaven? And how do arguments for the sake of heaven build relationships? So I'm going to just stop the share for the moment. And if we could, we'll just remove the spotlights just for a moment so we can see everybody. What are your thoughts? In what ways do arguments for the sake of heaven build lasting relationships? How do you see motivation, and how do you notice in your own life whether you've noticed yourself engaging in arguments for the sake of heaven or not for the sake of heaven, according to this, or others? Love to hear some of people's experience around this. William. Oh, William, you're not, I can't hear you. You're not muted, and so it seems fine, but there's no volume.
Is that better?
That is. Thank you.
So what happens when you can't even agree on what the truth is, though?
Yeah, right. In our world of alternative facts, it becomes difficult. And I guess in this in how we would apply kind of this model or this way of going is that the motivation here is not to say my set of facts is real, but what would it be like to open up to the fact of, there's a lot of different sets of facts that are around here. How do we come together to try to determine what's true? Is that motivation really what's coming from, or do I come into the argument already believing that my set of facts is the one that's right? Any other comments or questions?
I don't think you come to the table with your set of facts. I think you come to the table with your set of biases, and everything is in your window of your biases, and you can't listen until you get rid of your own biases.
Right. So maybe what you're saying, Arthur, is that in order to engage in an argument for the sake of heaven, you have to be willing to consider that you have bias. And maybe you're not aware of what that bias is. Our realities just feel like our realities, and our truths just feel like our truths. But what would it be like to say, you know what, how do I listen to the other person if I make the assumption that I'm already coming in with a set of bias? Alan.
Well, in my world, Rabbi, my discussions we try to be based on what I call peer-reviewed journalism. And I get really frustrated when I try to discuss with someone who's, because that's much more objective. I mean, you can't have peer-reviewed, double-blind, prospective studies on every subject, but that's kind of a pure discussion and there is no question really. And so when I hear people try to, basically give opinions that are obtuse to that, I try to listen and hear their point of view, but I always seem to go back to, if possible, these statistically significant research and information. And sometimes it's difficult to hear facts that are not facts, and to, sit there and try to listen and open a discussion maybe, but.
Right, yeah, I exactly, thank you, Alan. I mean, right here, what we're looking at is, we're not talking about that there's going to be any kind of necessarily resolution to our discussions or necessarily agreement. But I think right here is just from the very beginning, what is our motivation in it? Even as we have our own sense of peer-reviewed facts and all of those things, is our motivation in entering a conversation being about convincing the other person to see things our way, as right as they may be? Or is there a motivation to try to have a deeper understanding, whatever that is? Maybe our facts don't change, but maybe we come out of the conversation with a greater understanding of why somebody else holds the perspective that they do. And is there inherent value in that? It's just a question. Let's have one last comment, Wendy, on this question, then we'll go to the second text.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback on what Alan was saying about the resource, the peer-reviewed journals, because I think that one of the elements that feeds into our contemporary conversations is the source from which we get information. And there's some of us see information differently and check it out, and some of it just comes from social media and isn't founded in anything. So that complicates our perspective on facts. What are facts?
Thank you, Wendy. So there's obviously more to say on all of these, but I want to share this other text here. This is a very famous one from the Talmud. It says, for 3 years, there was a dispute between the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel. The former, the school of Shammai, asserting the law is in agreement with our views, and the latter, the school of Hillel, contending the law is in agreement with our views. Then a voice from heaven announced, these and those both are the words of the living God, but the law is in agreement with the rulings of the school of Hillel. Since, however, both are the words of the living God, what was it that entitled the school of Hillel to have the law fixed according to their rulings? Because they were kindly and modest, they taught their own rulings as well as the school of Shammai. And even more, they taught the rulings of the school of Shammai before their own. This should teach you that one who humbles oneself is exalted by the Holy One, and one who exalts themselves is humbled by the Holy One. So, just a couple of things. We're going to have an opportunity to have some short discussion of this in breakout groups, but two things is we have two different opinions, and the text is asserting that there is value to both of the opinions. What that value is, as far as truth, as far as facts or whatever, is not said, but in some way there is value in both opinions. And yet, the rulings go to one opinion and not the other. We have to make a choice. One goes forward, and what do we base that choice on? It's, in some sense, it's character, right? It's a sense that one perspective, one school, the school of Hillel, was willing to teach and had space for both opinions. Not that they agreed with both opinions, but they taught them. They were interested in understanding them. And not only that, but they taught the other one first before their own. So in some sense, one could say there was a willingness in the school of Hillel to let their students make up their own mind, right? To make up their own mind, to be able to say, here's the different voices in here. So let's go into breakout groups here. Let's say we have 18 people. So that would be for groups of 3. I think, Sarah, like 6 groups would be good if you have those, if you're able to do that. Let me stop the share, but I'm going to put in the chat the questions here. The questions that I'd love for us to respond to is, what can we learn from the voice from heaven in this midrash about how to listen to someone we disagree with? If you were to behave like the school of Hillel, how would you approach a disagreement with another? And just because we're going to have limited time, I'd love for us to focus on that second question. If you were going to behave like the school of Hillel, how would you approach a disagreement with somebody else? And I'll say, Alan, well, imagine that disagreement with that other person is somebody who is bringing a whole different set of facts, that's going on there. How would you do that? So let's go into our breakout groups. Sarah, are we okay there? Do you have a sense of how to do that?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody, as soon as you get the invitation to join a breakout, we'll do that. We're only going to spend about 6 minutes, just a couple minutes a piece, to get to share a little bit about this. Just a taste.
Rabbi, we have the handout, and also when we go to the breakout groups, we probably won't be able to see the chat. So if you could put it at the top, there's a way to insert it.
Yeah, let me do this. Okay, I'm going to put in the chat here, this is going to be the link to the text document with the questions. So before we go into breakout, if you click on that and open that up as a kind of a separate window from your Zoom, then you should be okay as you go into breakouts. Okay. Great. Okay, our people, great, there we go. All right, and I put you, Miles and Sarah, just in room 6. Oh, you're there. Good. Audrey, are you okay? Are you okay, Audrey? Do you see what you got there? Audrey, are you having trouble? All right, Sasha, I'm going to go to room 1 there just to balance it out a little bit.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna. It looks like Audrey's in there now.
Or did you want to?
I'm happy. Go for it. Go for it.
You know what I'd rather is if you would do it, then I can jump around a little bit. That'd be great.
Sounds good. I got it.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I know that was very short. We just wanted to have a little bit of a chance to share some words and thoughts because we have a real jam-packed, lots of content here. But I'd love to hear if there's one or two brief sharings that you felt like were either something you heard in your group or something that you discussed that just felt meaningful to you about the topic. Yeah, William.
I'll share. I think what I walked away with was, that the conversations when they're about learning can be productive and trying to understand. And it's a lot of what we had talked about, you had talked about earlier. But when they're about trying to convince that I'm right and you're wrong, instead of trying to find the common ground and where we can grow, it becomes a problem. So.
Right. Alan.
The importance of empathy and kindness go a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, the rabbis actually say that kindness and empathy is actually a way of gaining knowledge. And that's a really fascinating thing because we don't usually, when we think about knowledge, we think about the head. And when we think about kindness and empathy, we think more about the heart or the emotions. But for them, the word heart, lev, was really, in biblical times, it was very much head and heart were one thing. They were completely one thing. So, this idea that kindness and generosity can actually lead to knowledge is a fascinating one. So, I think one of the pieces that we're going to really focus on today in the science of polarization, before I turn this over to Sasha, is all of these Talmudic texts, this way of thinking about motivation for how we enter, it's all well and good. And I think for a lot of us here, we can feel and get the value of that. But there is so much in our own being that resists it in the moment. That really resists it for whatever the reasons, whether it's hearing, alternative facts that seem to have no basis in whatever, when it feels like the issues that we're talking about are so important and so we see the consequences of things in our world, and we don't have the time to entertain all these different perspectives. Why is it so hard to practice these things? And that's really what we're going to be learning tonight. Sasha.
Thank you, Rabbi Avot. That was beautiful. And thanks to the small group that I was in, I'm sure the other groups had nice conversations, but I really appreciated hearing your perspective on this. I'm going to try and, are you seeing my screen right now?
Not yet.
So let's do this. Okay, how about now?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is a short 30-second video. I wanted to share a little bit about One America movement, and our mission is to build a united American society by eliminating toxic polarization. And we're going to learn what we mean when we say toxic polarization. Before we jump into it, Rabbi Avot, I'm struck by some of the words that you were saying in these text studies. You asked us to focus not on the convincing of others. It's not on the resolution. And that can feel sometimes challenging for us because it's like, what's the point? When are we going to get there? Are we there yet? How long am I going to be in this? We're almost there. We're getting there. I want to arrive. And it's also challenging for us because I think oftentimes we come into these situations. We talked about this in our small group. We're encountering people in very unexpected times and unexpected places. We're often caught off guard, and our knee-jerk reaction is to go into defensive mode. We'll talk about that also. And our quick reactions are to try and tell them why they're wrong. And so before we jump into this, what I want to do is I want to invite everybody to just really think about tonight as being a practice opportunity, not for convincing anybody else, not for working on how to change anyone else, but cultivating space within you to be more open to that process, to that journey of understanding what you need to do to get to a better place so that you can have deeper, more impactful, meaningful relationships with people that you may or may not agree with. Let's go ahead and watch this. Let's see.
This is a challenging time for our country. It seems like we're more divided than ever, but we're better than this. And right now, we get to choose which path we're going to take.
Talking is good, and that's a great place to start, but that can't be the end of what we do together. That means taking the chance to get out there, roll up our sleeves, and take action, whether that's working together at a local shelter, or serving at the library, or mentoring kids together. There's a lot to be done right now.
We've got work to do. We've got to do it together. We can and we must rebuild this country. Join us.
Hey, real quick, a couple people, come off mute real quick. Tell me a couple verbs that you heard in that short video.
Cohesiveness.
Cohesive, great. What else? What's this about?
Join us.
Join us, join us. Great. What else?
Work together.
Yeah.
Work together, right? Right. And say that again.
Build and rebuild.
Build and rebuild, absolutely, right? So it's more than just talking. Talking is great. Talking is really important, but it can't only be about talking, right? These are action-oriented verbs. We have to do, not just talk. We have to be together. We have to serve together. We have to share food together. We have to be and belong and find belonging together. So we bring people together across racial, religious, and political divides, and we work within faith communities themselves, like Temple Bethel, because we know what happens within groups is just as important as what happens between groups. So tonight is really about figuring out that space for you, figuring out that space within your congregation here. And then later down the road, hopefully what we'll be able to do is take that and reach out to other people at other synagogues or other churches or other mosques and improve some of those relationships there as well. But we start intentionally internally. Our theory change says that if we work with faith communities to shape positive norms and behaviors within their groups, and if we build cross-cutting identities across religious, racial, and political divides, then we will create an America that is more resilient to toxic forms of division and ready to address problems in their neighborhood. So one of the questions that we get asked a lot is, does this mean that I have to find common ground with extremists? And it's really important that you hear this loud and clear. The answer is no. So when we consider sitting down with different groups or people who think differently from us, we ask ourselves the following question: am I at risk of being harmed if I sit down with this group or person, or might I feel discomfort? Discomfort is sometimes part of the work. Potential harm is too far. As we move through tonight's session, let's hold on to that question. When do I feel discomfort and when do I feel danger? For they're indeed two distinct feelings, and it's important to not conflate them. So this work wouldn't be possible without a few of our partners, and I'd like to name Over Zero, Beyond Conflict, and More in Common. They provide a lot of these training materials so that we can put them together and help provide them to congregations like yours. And many of the slides have generously been provided by them in full. So again, we're going to exercise our fingers here, and we're going to use the chat feature. What I'd like for you to do for the next session, we're going to say, do you agree with the statement or do you disagree? And we're going to use the numbers 1 through 5. And if you put the number 1, it means you don't agree with this at all. And 5 means you wholeheartedly agree with the statement. And it's fine if you're a 1, it's fine if you're a 5, and it's fine if you're somewhere in between. So go ahead and get your fingers ready, get the chat ready. And the first question is this, or the first statement, sorry. If you agree with this, I feel the division in our country on a regular basis. If you agree with that, wholeheartedly is a 5. If you disagree, it's a 1. I feel the division in our country on a regular basis. Great. Great, got some 5s, some 4s, some 2s. Great. I'm gonna go on to the next one. Got some 3s, 4s. Next question is, I worry about the division in my local community on a regular basis. Again, 1 means you don't agree with this at all. 5 means you wholeheartedly agree with this statement. Got some 3s, 4s, 5s, 0, 3. Terrific. Thanks, everybody. Great. Next one. The divisions in our country affect this congregation. 1, disagree. 5, agree. 5s, 2s, 4. Great. Last one. The divisions in our country impact my relationships with people I care about. 4, 5, 3, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2. Great. Thanks, everybody. Okay, you can give your fingers a rest for a few minutes, but remember, rotate them. You don't want to get all muscular in 1 or 2 fingers. Okay, so what do we mean when we say toxic polarization? What makes toxic polarization different from regular polarization? And why does that matter? So we're going to take a look here. And when we talk about normal polarization, we're saying, hey, I disagree with you on this issue. And maybe we root for different teams. My father-in-law's in Ohio State. He's a Buckeye, and they really don't like Michigan, vice versa. Okay, they root for different teams, and that's what it is, and that's static. Okay, that's what we talk about normal polarization, friendly sports rivalries, crunchy versus smooth peanut butter, healthy debate about the issues based on our lived experiences. Now, I want to be clear that any disagreement can be a normal or a toxic polarizing difference here. It's how we deal with these. So when we talk about, So Rabbi Kavod, you talked about Hillel and Shammai already. This is another quote. Can I get somebody to volunteer for this? Who has a voice? They could read this with some feeling. Can I get somebody to volunteer for that? I heard some really nice voices. I don't want to call anybody out. I'm gonna do it. Yeah, Kimberly.
He's got the better voice, but okay. Beit Shammai.
He does have a nice voice.
He does have a good voice. That surprised me that he wouldn't do it, but I'll be second fiddle. Beit Shammai did not refrain from marrying women from Beit Hillel, nor did Beit Hillel refrain from marrying women from Beit Shammai. This serves to teach you that they practice affection and camaraderie between them to fulfill that which is stated, love, truth, and peace. Zechariah 8:19, Talmud Yevamot 14.
Wonderful. It serves to teach you that they practiced affection and camaraderie between them to fulfill that which is stated, love, truth, and peace, right? In other words, despite the fact that the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai were well-known rivals, these rivalries did not become toxic and tribal, and instead they supported marriages between the two groups, knowing that these marriages would not only result in increased interactions between the houses of Hillel and Shammai, but that members of these two houses would actually be family. So it's worth noting that this passage comes after a long debate involving the laws of marriage, and even as they disagreed about practices in Jewish law around marriage, they still said that women and men from these two schools of thought could marry one another. Rabbi Kavod, was there anything that you wanted to add on in there?
No, I think you stated it perfectly.
I'm going to have to say thanks to Rabbi Rachel, because she did this part. I have close connections to a rabbi, and my wife is a rabbi, but this actually came from my colleague, Rabbi Rachel, who Rabbi Kavod got to study with before she went on maternity leave. So when we talk about toxic polarization, I want to juxtapose these. So we talked about normal polarization. Now we're going to just talk quickly about toxic polarization. So toxic polarization says, I don't like who you are, right? Your team is evil and they have to be stopped. And then it gets worse and worse, okay? So remember, normal polarization is like, hey, I root for this team and you root for that team. But in toxic polarization, I say that your team is evil. And because you root for them, you by default are also evil. Toxic polarization stops being about ideas and it starts being about our identities. Does that make sense? I'm gonna say that again. It stops being about ideas and starts being about our identities. So the thought that you can know everything about someone just because of the hat they wear or the mask that they wear or don't wear, right? This causes problems because it breaks our bonds. And that's because everything about us gets wrapped up into one of two identities. And that's either you're conservative or you're liberal, you are Democrat or Republican, right? And there are all these other identities that we're going to talk about. So before we get into some of these other identities, we're going to jump into our own self-exploration, and we're going to talk about our own identities. So if you could please, Rabbi Kavod, we're going to go into we're going to take a few minutes in a breakout room. It is now doing pretty good on time. We are looking at about 8 minutes, something like that. We're going to go in a breakout room, 8 to 10 minutes at the latest. If we do 8 minutes with a 2-minute warning, that'd be perfect. So what we're going to do, everybody, please, we're going to go into breakout rooms with 2 other people. All right. As we're doing that, I want you to think of a list of identities. Write down all the identities that that you connect with, like you know, I'm a dad, I'm a rabbi, I'm an athlete, I'm a Democrat, I'm Jewish, right? So list all those identities. Go ahead and do that now, okay? I'm actually, before we go into breakout rooms to talk about it, I'm going to give everybody just a minute here to write down those identities. It's okay if you have a few more, and it's okay if you're done. We'll go ahead and put pencils down in about 15 seconds. Pens down. Pens or pencils or quills, you know, or keyboards. All right, great. So just using your non-dominant hand now, raise that non-dominant hand if you listed 3 or more. 3 or more. Great. Okay. So keep those hands up if you listed 4 or more, 5 or more, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more. Great. Okay, thanks. It wasn't a competition. You have all won. So we know that we all hold multiple identities, right? All of us listed. Did any? I don't think, I'm going to make the assumption, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong, I don't think anyone listed one identity. So different identities, right? We know that we all hold these multiple identities. You hold them, I hold them, we all hold them. And different identities feel more salient in different situations. And so, like, perfect example right now, my identity as One America Movement staff member is salient for me. That's what I'm doing here, and that's why I get the privilege of talking with y'all. But if my son or daughter walk in with bloody nose, then I flip into Abba mode really quickly, right? So for you, what I'd like for you to do is circle the identities that feel the most salient for you in this moment. And that can be tonight, that can be in this time that we're living through, but circle the top identities that feel most salient to you in this moment. Great. Okay, great. So now what I'd like for you to do, we're going to go into breakout rooms for about 7 minutes. And in these breakout rooms, what I'd like for you to do is consider which of your identities feel the most marginalized or criticized. Okay, and it can be any of the salient ones, or it can be any of the identities that you listed on there. All right, so if we could get some Zoom assistance to put us into breakout groups of 3, and Again, share with each other, take turns, be mindful of the time. Share which of these identities feel the most marginalized or criticized. We'll do 7 minutes with a 2-minute warning. I'll see you back here in 9 minutes. Thanks.
the end of that sentence was, then be a first-year rabbi.
Welcome back, everyone.
Wendy, I got the end of that. We'll fill in the rest of it later.
Did you want to quickly share that, Wendy? No.
I was just saying that I attended Ziegler's ordination last night, and it was very upsetting because it did highlight some of the problems that have been going on the last couple of years, and they were saying how difficult it is to be in rabbinical school during COVID. And my son's take was, yes, that was challenging, but it was difficult being a first-year rabbi in 2 years of COVID.
Yeah. No, thanks. Okay, friends, I'm not sure if I posted this in the chat. Did everyone see this in their group, or was it only just in my? Okay, great. So let's take a minute here. So we talked about which of these identities feels most marginalized or criticized. Can we get one person to share an identity that felt, maybe criticized or marginalized? And maybe it's not like on a scale from 1 to 10. 10 is extremely marginalized or criticized, and maybe you feel 6, maybe you still feel 4. That's okay. But just which one of those identities feels criticized or under threat?
Well, I'll jump in and say that, I also tied it into, why am I here tonight? And that has to do with just being Jewish. So the Jewish component of my identity certainly came out, and I certainly find out that, in a lot of the business dealings and stuff like that, it's one of those that, you're not supposed to talk about religion anyhow. So it's better, since you don't know where people are coming from, maybe to hold back on that one again a bit, because you feel like there's an opportunity to be marginalized. There's an opportunity to bring up stuff, even though I work for a company that's prides itself on being very accepting and very diverse. Still, it's one of those that you don't know exactly where specific individuals might be coming from.
Yeah, appreciate you being brave and sharing. Great. Just a couple other. We're gonna just jump in with a few of the questions here. Can somebody share? This is something. It's a little bit personal, but when one of your identities feels marginalized, criticized, or under threat, how does it impact your behavior? And I actually heard this in the first round of small group discussions. But think about, like, when you feel like that identity is criticized or under threat, how does it impact your behavior? A couple people share out.
Don't mention it.
Don't mention it. Say more.
I think, like Steve said, you don't bring up your religion.
Great. Thank you, Gail. Yeah. You don't want to talk about it. Right? Great. Who else?
I think it's either one extreme or the other for me. So sometimes it's either defensive posture and I need to be heard and validated, and I'm leaning in or pushing my way in, or it's, that's usually my MO, but I think things have become so extreme in some areas that I just back off now. It's like,
yeah, great.
Not even.
Right.
Sometimes what I do is I share with confidence, because I want to protect the other person from saying or doing something really embarrassing. Like if I feel like they're going to start making some anti-Semitic comments or some other type of thing that it's going in a bad direction, I'll say, well, as a Jew, ... And it saves them from going someplace that they may have been heading that would have been a lot more comfortable for everybody.
Jason, you head right into it. Flames roaring. You just take. Thanks. One more. Who else? What do you do when you feel like that identity is under threat?
Where's my car?
That's garage.
No, it's not.
Depends on the situation. I may dodge it. I may go forward.
Yeah. Okay. It sounded like we had somebody talking, but did anybody want to share one more? What do you do when that identity feels under threat? How does it impact your behavior? How does it change you?
I remember when my mom passed away, and I was friendly with a woman who was very, very religious Christian. And she would talk like, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to go to hell. And not quite using those words, but so after my mom died, I said to her, because it was starting in that direction, I said, I believe my mom's in heaven, and and very, very firmly I said that, and it just stopped that
Yeah.
train of her thought, because I didn't agree with her. I remember doing that.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm sorry about your mom. That's never easy.
That was many years ago, but that was a very impactful comment that she was
Yeah.
that conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. So I want to ask if somebody can share, based on the identities that you listed, who can be brave and share something that you think other people in that identity group do well?
Would you say that again, please?
Yeah, so you made that list of the identities that you connect with. Is there one of those that you can think of that when you think about other people that are in that group? So let's say you said, Jewish people, Jews, right? So what do you think is something that Jews do well, if that's one of the identities that you connect to, right? How about Kavod? Fathers provide for their families. Great. Kavod identified with being a father, and other fathers provide for their families.
Education oriented.
Yeah, and so what do other people in that group do well?
Apparently he didn't hear you.
Did you hear what I said? Education is this.
Pushing education.
Yeah, okay, great. So just say a little bit more. The identity for you is what? And what do you think other people in that group do well, Arthur?
In the other group, or the group I think I'm in?
Yeah, the group that you think that you're in. What's the name of that group?
Jewish.
Jewish, okay. And you're great. So that identity group, you think that what they do well is they are education oriented. Is that correct?
Correct.
Cool, awesome. I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right. Great, awesome. Parents seek to protect their children. Beautiful. Okay, now here's a challenge. Think about one of those identity groups, whatever it is. What's something that they don't do well that you can share as a person who subscribes to that identity group? What's one thing that they don't do well?
I don't want to say it.
Mute. Put on mute.
So even listing like my first 3 or 4, like wife, mother, friend, daughter.
Right.
My answer to your first question would have been, what do they do well? In any of those, they balance the other 10 along with those like top 4 or 5. So what do we not do well is balance all the different identities and show up for yourself within all those.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Kimberly. So just using Kimberly and Steve's example, Steve said that parents seek to protect their children, and then what they don't do well, they can be overprotective sometimes, right? That's the flip side of that, okay? So we want to think about these things. When we think about our identities, we're trying to form a well-rounded picture here. What we're going to do now, we're going to shift for a second, and we're going to watch a short video, and this is from Over Zero. This is one of our partners. I want to make sure that everybody can hear this. And this is on our social identities. And there are a couple key concepts here that we're going to come back to after this video. And this is about, just a 2-3 minute video.
A brief introduction to social identity. When it comes to understanding the type of conflict and violence that happens between groups, it's really important to understand groups. Being a part of a group is in some ways the most fundamentally human thing. Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs puts belonging just above our basic physical needs, and it is at the center of our species' evolutionary strategy, our ability to coordinate as a group to survive and thrive. The groups we are part of form pieces of our social identity, parts of who we are and how we see ourselves. Each of us carry many identities, whether it's our identity as a mother, daughter, baseball fan, our religion, or our political party. These are the anchors that tell us and the world around us who we are and where we can find belonging. And while some identities are chosen by us, many are given to us, whether we like it or not, like race, religion, or language. When we feel anxious, stressed, or scared, we seek safety in our groups, and our group identities become even more important to us. So we associate our safety and survival with that of our group. To protect our groups, and through them ourselves, we are attuned to be extra sensitive to threats to that group, whether those threats are real, perceived, or constructed. Once groups see each other as threats or competitors, the identities of each group become more singular and rigid. We are more likely to see us as one like-minded, uniform collective, while we see them just as one monolithic block. With unifying and cross-cutting identities pushed to the side, intergroup conflict will often be seen as zero-sum. I win, you lose. You win, I lose. Compromise isn't an option, and group members who advocate for it are likely to be silenced, punished, or even seen as traitorous. In this situation, further polarization, conflict, and even violence become possible. So what does this mean for how we can prevent and counteract polarization, conflict, and violence between groups? First, it's essential to understand the role that our social identities play in conflict. What are the identities that are being activated for conflict? How does this impact people's responses to things like criticisms of members of their groups or competitiveness with other groups? So what can we do? One thing is to remember that we all have multiple identities. In conflict, we can be driven into just one part of our identity. It's important to take action to prevent that. Can we find bigger identities that unite us? Can we keep alive the cross-cutting identities that let us connect across conflict lines? To learn more, download the Social Identity Information Sheet in the video description. A brief introduction to social identity.
Okay. Can I get a thumb if you can hear me okay? Yeah? Cool. Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Okay, great. So there's two key concepts here that I just want to talk about from that. And that's this notion of singular rigid identity and cross-cutting identities. So just to recap there, what we want to pull from that is that with singular rigid identities, and all of these, right? Raise your hand if you had 8, 9, 10 more identities, right? All of those identities, they get bundled up and put into the black hole that then becomes the one singular rigid identity. Israel, Palestine, Republican, Democrat, and all of us, we are made up of so many different identities, right? And so with singular rigid identities, it's important to recognize when that's happening. And we're going to talk now just juxtaposing that with cross-cutting identities. And cross-cutting identities, really, this is something that unites us. And this is something that we can, a banner that we can both stand under. And whenever we fall victim to singular rigid identities, we forget that, we all have these multiple identities, and that they're sometimes shifting, they're sometimes overlapping, and that other people do as well. And that's really, really, really important for us all in our own internal work to recognize our own cross-cutting identities and others' multiple identities. Because when we fail to do that, it makes division a lot worse. And when we lump them into these singular rigid identities, it becomes harder and harder to talk to everybody. So back to toxic polarization. When we talk about toxic polarization, what we're saying is that there's this dangerous feedback loop. What happens is that one side perceives the other to be extreme, and collaboration becomes harder. And then without that collaboration, extreme voices become louder as people are less willing to speak up. And collaboration, that's the key, it becomes harder and harder. And it's sad that it's not just about our relationships that break down, but that toxic polarization, it really makes it harder to solve our common problems. And those common problems are things like adequate healthcare, addressing homelessness, food insecurity, clean water, climate change. All these are made worse by our toxic polarization. So to jump a little bit deeper into the science, we're going to talk about why this is happening. All right, real quick, who can shout out what they see? Unmute yourself. What do you see?
Faces.
Faces.
Faces anyway.
Wendy sees faces. Who else?
Scary faces.
Scary faces. What else?
I see anger.
Anger. What else?
2 happy faces.
Happy faces. Great. So you see happy faces. Okay. So you're
Sticking your tongue out.
you're subscribing emotion to a seatbelt, a backpack, a bathtub, a cheese grater, and a really amazing looking pepper. And our minds quickly interpret these things as faces. And why is that? A lot of you know this. A lot of you know this already. For those that don't, this is why. So let's pretend we're walking through the forest hundreds of thousands of years ago, the grasslands, and we look out. Everybody, get down, get down. What is that? Oh my God, is that? Oh, it's just a hay. Okay, it's just it's a tumbleweed. Okay, fine, we're all good. Tumbleweed. We're walking along, walking along. What is that? Oh my God, what is that? That is a lion, right? And hundreds of thousands of years ago, we looked out on the grasslands, and if we saw a tumbleweed, guess what? Hey, we were all right. No harm. We're good. But if we looked out and we saw a lion, then our bodies triggered an activation, and we were ready to run, or we were ready to fight, or we were going to freeze, right? But if we looked out in that grassland and we didn't see that lion, that's the end of our survival. That lion's going to get us. So we evolved really over time to look for faces, and not only look for faces, but to register whether those faces are friend or foe. So speaking of friends or foe, which one of these guys would you like to be friends with?
The seatbelt.
Seatbelt. Okay. Yeah. Great. A lot of people want to be friends with the seatbelt. So yeah, cheese grater, right? I want to hang out with the cheese grater too. I want to see what's going on with that bathtub, see if I can cheer it up. The pepper face, I've seen some scary things there. So why do we do this? And that's really because we create groups automatically. And why do we do this? Because it's so much easier if, God forbid, we look out in the grasslands and there is this hungry lion. It's much easier to fend her off. It's much easier to defend ourselves when we have a group to back us up. And this happens fast. How fast? It happens in a matter of milliseconds. And that's our evolutionary biology at work. So we got to form a group, and that's part of our survival. And once we form that group, we try to stay in that group. Like many human beings, wolves live in extended families, which are called packs. Pack life ensures the care and feeding of the young and allows wolves to defend their common territory. Wolves live in packs because that cooperation allows them to bring down larger prey. So now, I know we're talking a lot about animals, so let's bring this back to us. I want you to think about what song was on the radio when you were in middle school, all right? You got that? It's funny. This is a true story, Rabbi Kavod. The song that comes to my mind is a song by Tevin Campbell, and you know what it's called? It's called Can We Talk? Isn't that funny? And that's tonight. So imagine we walk into middle school cafeteria, all right? First day of school. Our reactions, they're biologically driven, and we need each other, right? We have to find your group. Where are you going to sit? Who can you sit with? Who's going to make space for you? Who's going to beat you up? Who's going to take your lunch money, right? So studies have shown that loneliness is as detrimental to our health as smoking. So we have to find a group. That's part of our survival. It's part of our evolutionary biology. And once we find that group, so what are we willing to do to maintain our group membership? And that's sadly almost anything. You see in the first picture, this guy is off in the corner. He's like, I'm not going to be part of your stupid picture. You guys are making a fool out of yourself. I am not. And then the second group, he's like, well, these are my friends. Oh, I can't lose them. I got to do it. Fine, I'm in, right? So we care sometimes more about being a good group member than we do about the truth sometimes, right? We're deeply, deeply influenced by perceived group norms, which are often shaped by the loudest people in the room. So I want you to think about taking out your phone, your laptop, you're looking on social media, and you're really close. You're really close to saying something that if you do it, there's a real good chance that people in your group, your party, your crew, whatever it is, people in that group are going to disagree with, and they're going to disagree strongly, and maybe even cancel. So would you hesitate? Tell me what's going on. A couple people unmute themselves. You're about to say something. Maybe if it's not on social media, maybe it's in person, but you're about to say something that you could potentially, really get attacked by your own group. What's going on? Tell me about your feeling.
So I'm going to jump in. This has happened so many times. Sometimes it's my lack of self-confidence or my lack of confidence to be able to defend my position against even potentially irrational responses. So it might just be like on a head-to-head, can I go toe-to-toe? I've actually thought this many times in religious conversations. Like I don't necessarily know enough about Christianity to say something, or we live in a very Bible belt. So sometimes I don't even feel like I want to get in those conversations because I don't know that I can't quote scripture. So I'm not going to be able to do that. And then in some cases it's like, I don't even know where you're going to go. I can't defend myself.
Right.
So it's less for going against the grain and more for just feeling I don't know how long I could stay in the fight.
Yeah. So you're talking about that feeling of self-consciousness. Thanks, Kimberly. Appreciate you sharing that. So think about one more person. Share how you would feel specifically about saying something within your own group, right? Whether that's I'm seeing. Thank you. I can't see everyone. Yeah, Miles, please. Yeah, go for it, man.
For me, I think it's about respecting oneself and having the self-confidence to be who you are and express where you're coming from, regardless of what people think or how they feel, because you're honoring yourself. And if you can't honor yourself, how can you honor someone else? If not for me, then who? I mean, it comes down to, if I'm not willing to stand up for somebody, are they going to be willing to stand up for me? Same with me. If I can't say my true feelings, then who am I to participate in a conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Miles. I appreciate that. And that says a lot of bravery right there. I would love to hear how life shaped you into being the brave man that you are. I think that's cool. I think a lot of people, I think sometimes we question, and hopefully we still do that thing that's right, that you need to do. But I think that there's that feeling of fear. What if I lose my friends? Like what if I'm perceived, as something that I don't feel like I am here, And so for tonight, we're just kind of scratching the surface here. What I want us to know is that our journey here. This is the first session. We'll be together next week. We'll learn more science terms. One of the things that I want to shed a little bit of light on, give you a preview for next week, and that's when we talk about how our values become sacred to us. And we often assume motives that other people might not actually possess. So a couple things to think through ahead of next week is the notion of sacred values and motive misattribution. I'm going to just share that with you very quickly. Sacred values are values that are seen as absolute and non-negotiable. We process them in a different part of our brain than we process issues where we feel able to compromise. And we'll talk more about that next week. Motive misattribution is when we believe that people on our side are motivated by love and people on the other side are motivated by hate or ignorance or stupidity or anger or whatever it is, right? So a couple things that we want to take away from tonight. Pirkei Avot says that in a place where there are no human beings, strive to be one. And this brings us back to the conversation that Rabbi Avot kicked off this evening. And we thought when we think about those conversations for the sake of heaven, and for those Harry Potter fans, this other quote says, it takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. For tonight, what I'd like to do before we jump into a couple reflection questions here, I'd like for us to finish up with a quick reading, and I'm going to ask William. I'm going to put you on the spot if that's okay. We're gonna use that good voice of yours. Is that okay?
Yes, be nice.
My wife is saying yes, it's okay.
Kimberly, is it okay if William reads? I love it.
And my first identity was husband, so I guess I'll live with that one.
Perfect. So so this is just a quick little passage here. William, go ahead and take it away for us with passion.
Stand up for what is right. Then the Eternal One said, the outrage of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sins so grave. I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will take note. The men went on from there to Sodom while Abraham remained standing before the Eternal One. Abraham came forward and said, will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? What if there should be 50 innocent within the city? Will you then wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the innocent 50 who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty, so that innocent and guilty fare alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly?
Thank you. Great. So before we finish things off, I want to ask, we talked a little bit about the process of polarization and how it takes hold of us. What I'd like for you to do is think of a time in your own life. This isn't anything that you need to share, but I want you to think about a time where you can see that these processes maybe didn't go the way that you would have preferred. Maybe some of these things that we've learned about our brains activating, the way that we moved through and tried to hold fast to our group norms and our survival. Maybe those things got the best of you. I want you to think about some ideas that you have for how you can remove yourself from the cycle of toxic polarization. So if you can, please be so kind as to flood the chat room right now with a few ideas that you have for how you can remove yourself next time you're faced in a similar situation, how you can remove yourself from that cycle of toxic polarization. What are a couple things that jump to mind for you? Thanks, Heather. Appreciate that. Thanks, Wendy. See the divine image in others, try to be understanding, tolerant, look for the commonalities, seek to understand what is at stake in the issue for the other person. Thank you, Rabbi Kavod. That's wonderful. And the last question, I'm going to just copy this. The last question that I have, I'm going to pass it back to Rabbi Kavod. But and maybe this goes hand in hand with what you just put in the chat. But what's one thing you could try to do over the next week before we meet again to work on those relationships, to work on cultivating that space for yourself where you can grow and you can recognize some of these cross-cutting identities in others and not necessarily subscribe them into the singular rigid identities. Thanks, Audrey. Pray and think before talking, being mindful and thoughtful. Thank you. Thanks. Listen. Appreciate that, Wendy. Okay, and the real last question here is, what's one thing that you're taking away from tonight's session? What's one thing that you're taking away from tonight's session? You can put that in the chat. One thing that you're going to take away from tonight's session. Thanks, Wendy. Good to be in community. Audrey, thank you. Look for common ground with others. Thanks, Karen. Interesting information. Rabbi Avot, how much our identities are formed by the groups we are a part of. Absolutely. Thank you. Gail says optimism, optimism. Thanks, Gail. Steve, the competing identities that we all have. Great. Wonderful. Well, again, I'm Sasha with One America Movement. I look forward to being with you again next week. And I'm going to pass it back to Rabbi Avot. And I want to say thank you all for joining tonight. Thank you for your participation. Thanks for exercising your voices and your fingers. And thanks for bringing yourself. I look forward to seeing you next week.
Where in Boston are you from?
I'm actually, I
Where
love
are
the
you
question.
now?
Where
Where
are
are
you
you
from?
now?
I'm in Marblehead, but I grew up in Houston and I just moved to Massachusetts in August.
Oh, you've gone down to the seashore?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Beautiful?
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah.
Marblehead is beautiful.
Yeah. And Arthur, where are you from?
Boston.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I don't know if you heard it, but I love the accent. They say Marblehead.
Yeah, of course it is.
I love it.
Sasha, thank you so much for just beginning to lay this foundation in a very clear and compassionate way. What I wanted to close with a story that some of you may have heard, but the story is about a bunch of blind men, and we were a group, and they were making their way through a forest, and they came to a clearing, and one of them said, I feel the most strange tree trunk. It's amazing. And then the other one says, tree trunk? No. It's a rope. I feel this incredible rope. Another one comes on and says, no, there is a vine. I'm actually able to swing on this vine. Another one says, no, it's a huge piece of canvas that's waving in the ground, in the wind. And the fifth blind man is listening, and there's some silence from him for a while, and he says, I was listening to all of you telling such different ideas about what this is that we're discovering. So I went over to the one who said that it was a tree trunk, and I felt that. And then I went to to my brother here who felt the rope, and I gave that a feeling. And then went over here to the canvas and over to the hanging vine. And everybody, what we've just discovered is an elephant. It's an elephant. And it was really only, obviously, from seeing all the different perspectives and understanding that the whole picture could be discovered. And so, I think one of the things that I'm appreciating and looking forward to discovering more in this series is what are the dynamics and things that are at play that keep us from seeing the whole picture with each other, and how do we conquer those things. So I really hope to see you all next week, same time, same bat channel, and really appreciate your sharing and showing up. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Really good
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night.